the myths, not the theories, not the science. What it found was something that should not have been there at all. This is the story of what actually happened when a machine finally went to the bottom of the Bermuda Triangle. No dramatization, no invented details, just the footage, the data, and the question that still has no clean answer. It started as a business deal, not a science expedition, not a government operation, a contract. In the early 2000s, a Canadian deep-sea exploration company struck an agreement with the Cuban government. The terms were straightforward. Cuba needed revenue. The waters surrounding the island were known to hold hundreds of sunken Spanish colonial ships, vessels that went down during storms and sea battles centuries ago, many of them still carrying silver, gold, and trade cargo that never reached Europe. The company would scan the seabed, locate the wrecks, and recover anything valuable. The crew were engineers and ocean technicians, men who trusted instruments and data, not folklore. They had worked on offshore surveys before, and this one looked identical to every other project on paper. Weeks of methodical scanning, mostly empty results, occasional wreck signatures buried in sediment. That was the job, and they expected nothing more. The scanning equipment worked by sending sound waves toward the ocean floor and measuring how those waves bounced back. It is a reliable method because sound travels well underwater, even where light cannot penetrate. On screen, the seabed usually appears chaotic. Soft mud absorbs sound and appears dark. Rock reflects it and appears bright. The shapes are always uneven, random, natural. Then the pattern broke. Somewhere west of Cuba, in waters that technically fall within the western edge of the Bermuda Triangle, the screen began showing something different. Bright returns, yes, but not scattered. Straight lines, long, clean edges that stayed consistent no matter what angle the ship passed over them. The crew ran the scan again, then again from a different heading. The shapes did not change. They adjusted the equipment. They checked for calibration errors. The result held. What they were seeing had shadows behind it. That detail mattered more than people realize. In underwater scanning, shadows only form when an object has height and mass. Flat sand cannot produce them. Mud cannot produce them. What cast those shadows was solid, and it was standing above the seabed, not lying flat in it. The crew compared the data against known reference points. Shipwrecks appear broken and scattered. Coral formations grow in curves. Natural rock formations at this depth are irregular. None of those explanations matched what the instruments were returning. The shapes were too large, too evenly spaced, and too geometrically consistent to dismiss as noise or coincidence. At this point, the survey had stopped being a survey. The team made a decision that had not been part of the original plan. They were going to send the drone down. The underwater robot was built for deep water work. Small and reinforced, it carried bright lights and cameras designed to operate where the sun had never once reached. The crew ran through every system check before lowering it, because a failure at 700 meters meant losing the machine entirely. There was no retrieval at that depth if something went wrong. As the drone descended, light faded quickly. Within the first few hundred meters, the water above became a dim memory. Below 300 meters, it was gone completely. The ocean at that depth is not dark the way a room is dark when you switch off the light. It is a different kind of darkness, heavy, pressurized, and absolute. The drone's own lights were the only thing that existed. At 700 meters, the seabed came into view. What appeared on the cameras was not what anyone on board had prepared themselves to see. Large, flat surfaces filled the frame. As the drone moved closer, edges came into focus. Sharp edges, clean corners, massive stone blocks sitting close together with smooth, precise faces. The surfaces were not buried. They were not broken. They were not draped in the kind of thick sediment that naturally accumulates on anything sitting on the deep ocean floor over thousands of years. They looked like they had been placed there. The crew watched the footage in silence. The scans had already told them something was down there. The cameras were now telling them what it was, and the two things together left very little room for comfortable explanations. When the footage was analyzed in detail, more questions opened up. The blocks were enormous. Some measured several meters across. Their sides were flat, not rough in the way that natural stone fractures and erodes. Many of them sat in straight rows with consistent spacing between them. The pattern repeated. It did not look accidental. The stone itself was unusual. The geology of the area near Cuba is dominated by limestone, a soft sedimentary rock that forms slowly from compressed marine life. Limestone weathers easily. It develops holes, cracks, and irregular surfaces over time. What the cameras showed was different. Dense, hard-faced stone with the characteristics of granite, a rock that forms under intense heat deep inside the earth and does not naturally occur on shallow or mid-depth seabeds in this region. If the blocks were granite, that raised a question with no easy answer. Granite does not form underwater, it forms on land. For granite blocks of that size to be sitting on the seafloor, 700 meters beneath the surface, the land they came from would have had to sink, and land does not sink that far overnight. Geologists who reviewed the data could not agree on a single natural explanation that accounted for all of it simultaneously. Each theory explained one part but left another detail unresolved. A tectonic collapse could explain the depth. It could not explain the straight edges. Natural geology could explain some stone shapes. It could not explain the consistent spacing and the lack of sediment coverage. The pieces did not assemble into a clean picture, no matter how they were arranged. The timeline created its own problem. For land to drop 700 meters, the process typically takes tens of thousands of years. That pushes the date of whatever once sat on that surface back to a point in human history when, according to everything we currently accept, people were living in small, mobile groups with stone tools. There is no confirmed evidence of any civilization at that period of prehistory capable of cutting and placing stone blocks of that scale and precision. Yet the shapes on the seafloor suggest exactly that. Planning, measurement, order. The only alternative theory that partially fits is a rapid geological collapse. A single catastrophic event, a massive earthquake or sudden land subsidence that dropped the site quickly rather than gradually. This would explain why the sediment coverage is inconsistent with a slow, long burial. A fast drop could have sealed the site off before normal deep water accumulation could obscure it. But even this idea does not fully account for the geometry of what the cameras recorded. Earthquakes collapse structures, they scatter and bury them. They do not preserve straight rows of evenly spaced blocks with intact surfaces 7 centuries deep under the ocean. After the initial survey, the site was left alone. It was too deep and too costly to excavate. The equipment needed to properly investigate the scale of what had been found did not exist in a form that could be deployed at that depth in those waters. The Canadian company filed its findings. Scientists reviewed the data. Debate circulated in academic circles, and then, quietly, the site receded from attention. What remained was the footage, the scan data, and a question sitting on the floor of the ocean at 700 meters without any owner. The Bermuda Triangle spent decades, as a story told, around the edges of what we do not know. Ships vanished there, yes. Planes went down there, yes. But most of those disappearances have since been accounted for by weather, human error, and the statistical reality that the triangle covers one of the most heavily trafficked stretches of ocean on Earth. The legend grew not because the place was more dangerous than anywhere else. It grew because the explanation was never as interesting as the mystery. But this is different. This is not a missing vessel or a disappearing crew. This is something on the floor of the sea that has no agreed explanation. Footage that exists. Data that was collected by professionals with no interest in mythology. Blocks that are there at depth in a pattern that nature struggles to account for. Whether the structures beneath the western edge of the Bermuda Triangle were built by human hands from a civilization we have not yet placed in our understanding of history, or whether the Earth itself arranged them in some geological sequence we have not yet fully mapped, the answer sits at 700 meters under cold, pressurized darkness. The ocean does not give up what it holds easily. It kept this from us for however long it has been down there. It may keep it from us for a long time yet. What do you think is sitting on that seabed? Something nature built, or something far older than the history books are willing to admit? Let me know what you believe in the comments below. And if you want to keep going deeper into the stories that official accounts leave out, subscribe. There is more coming, and none of it is the clean version.